From Wacko Chaco Studio, I am Ashwin Chaco, and this is The Fruitful Life, a show about the business of creativity and the stories behind the creators that have made their dreams a reality. Hey folks, welcome to The Fruitful Life, Matthew LeBaron. Hey Matthew.
Thanks for having me. How's it going?
Good, good. Thanks so much for joining me. For our listeners, can you share who you are and what you do?
Man, who I am. I think I'm still trying to figure that out at 43 years old, nearly 43. But as you said, my name is Matthew LeBaron. I am the founder and agent at Much Creative, and we are a hybrid agency where we represent and manage artists as well as coach artists and creative freelancers. We also have a arm of our business called Collab, where we network with artists like yourselves and offer one-off project management as well as resourcing for brands and agencies.
That's so cool. And I'm looking forward to digging into that whole agency side of things. But before
Yeah.
we do, the first thing I like to do with all my guests is ask them this question. If you
Yeah.
could be a fruit, what fruit would it be and why?
Um, yeah, I think I'd be a tomato because tomato is
Ah,
like actually a fruit, but it's a little like unknown. And I think that that pairs really well with what I do. Like, people don't really know a lot about my side of the business, about like what agents or coaches do. And yet we're still a part of the whole process. We're still considered a fruit. So yeah. And I love tomatoes too. They're just like, I love grape tomatoes. I pop them like grapes. And yeah, I think tomato easily.
nice, nice. You like being an enigma.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, funny enough, you probably can't see it because of my blur, but this ring says Enigma. And
Okay.
yeah, so it's funny you say that. This is a word that's been bounced around within my friend group for a long time.
That's so cool. So, speaking about friend groups and, something that you've been called for a long time, I'm curious, looking back at your history, were you always interested in the creative world? I mean, what was the path that or what was the journey that brought you to the position you're in today?
Yeah, yeah. No, thank you for asking that. Yeah, and that's a good question because I think some people think, we spend our whole lives being creatives, and some people do and some people don't. I have been drawing since I could pick up a pencil. So from the age of like 4, I was scribbling and was lucky enough. I had a grandparent, my grandmother. She actually kept a lot of my drawings from, when I was a toddler all the way through grade school. And I grew up in a gown shop that she owned, and my mother ran with her. And what they did, it was actually an early version of Rent the Runway in the like late 80s, early 90s. They called it Rent a Gown. And what they would do is buy dresses, bridesmaids dresses and gowns that were used once. And then they'd bring them into their shop. And then people could come into the shop, say, oh, I really like these dresses. And they would hem and tailor them and adjust them for those people. And they would rent them, and then they would bring them back. And so it was like a really early Rent the Runway. But I grew up in that environment where there was constant like creative and altering going on, and I was really encouraged to be creative. It is something that I'm very, very fortunate to have grown up with. I know some people grow up with parents who are like, you have to be practical and be a lawyer or a doctor or whatever. But I was very much encouraged by everybody around me to be highly creative. So I spent a lot of my time doodling when I probably should have been studying and listening in class.
I can
I
relate.
was, bet. I'm sure there are a lot of people listening who can relate. And, I didn't do too well in high school. I really just got the bare minimum done. I was always drawing. I was always taking photographs. I was always just kind of like trying to do and experience more things. And somehow managed to go to SVA. I got into SVA, and I still have the portfolio that I applied with. I found it during COVID. And yeah, I got into SVA, which was always a dream of mine. I wanted to move to New York City. I grew up in northern New York, Albany area. So it's only like 3 hours south of Albany, which I used to escape to down to the city a lot. Anyway, so I went to SVA. I was there for about a year. It's a wonderful education. I can't say any bad things about SVA. I just couldn't afford it. So I was like, what am I doing? I'm spending like 30 plus grand on school a year. I'm in New York City. I'm just going to work for a few years. So I took 5 or 6 years off, just worked, and then slowly decided, okay, I think I want to go back to school now. Went back to school for illustration at the Fashion Institute of Technology, which is a state school. I'm not sure what the equivalent is for university in the UK, but basically, if you live in a state and they have a state school program and you're a resident, you can go to that school for like a fraction of what private schools cost. So, and at the same time, you're getting a really wonderful education. So anybody who's listening, if you're in the US and you have state schools, definitely consider them before privates. They're wildly inexpensive and really good educations. Anyway, so I was going to school. I was going to school during the day. I was working and waiting tables at night in New York City. I had this really cool thing going on. I really loved my life. And me being the terrible student that I am, I missed a meeting that basically was to determine how your next semester was going to go, if you were going to be a night student or a day student. So all the day slots got taken. I ended up getting pushed into night classes, and anybody who works in the food service industry knows working days is just garbage. Yeah, you don't make any money. And here it's based on tips. So I had to find a day job. And my partner at the time, he was working for Entertainment Weekly magazine. Art director was in the know. This is pre-Instagram, kids, pre all that stuff. This was like monster.com, I think, was the most useful thing out there for finding a job. Anyway, he was really plugged in and he goes, hey, there's this opening for an art assistant at a rep agency. And at the time I was like, oh, reps are like terrible. They teach us that in school. Reps are awful people. Like, you don't want a rep. That's what every illustration and art teacher told us. So I go into this meeting and apply for this job. I'm sitting down with the owner and my would-be boss. And they were like, so, what do you like about this? Why do you want to? And I was like, oh, I really am looking forward to being surrounded by illustrators and like learning the business and this and that. And they were like, well, what's your ambition a few years from now? I was like, well, I don't know, but I definitely don't want to be an agent. They're really evil, or something to that effect in my interview. So I got the job because apparently I'm charismatic. And within 2 years, fate would have it, someone was out like on holiday. The reps were all busy. I ended up like taking a job on and helping produce it. And being someone who knew about art and how it was created, I took on more of a project manager role angle as a rep. And from then on, I was like, oh man, I love this. Like, I'm helping artists. I'm on their side. Like, we're teaming up. I'm bringing them clients. I'm bringing clients to them. And it made sense. So I spent 12 years at Bernstein and Andrew while I finished my degree a year later after joining. A couple years after that, I got my own division. This was early days CGI when it was like first getting good. And I was able to work with artists like Serial Cut, Razan Perrine, Bose Collins, a number of really amazing CG artists, and got to build out a pretty cool CG program there.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting journey. And it's like you unexpectedly found the career for you, even like you're pursuing an illustration career potentially. And then suddenly the enemy became you.
Yeah. And the thing I realized during that time, I was like, well, if the prevailing theory here is that like reps are evil, I'm always one who's like, let's change the story. Let me like be a good rep. Let me make a good example. And like, I think anybody that I've worked with at BA and now at my agency Much could attest to this. Like, I'm a partner, I'm a collaborator with them. It's not, just about how much money can we make. It's about how much money can I get them? How can I give the client the experience that they want? And can everybody leave the project being really happy with what they created? And that's really what the ethos was for me starting my own agency, Much Creative, which I started 7 years ago, was really about making good work. I had my Jerry Maguire moment. I was like, I just want a smaller list of talent. I want to like really enjoy the work we're doing. And I want to be able to like go to bed at night feeling good about all of it, and I do.
So I think at this stage, it'll be interesting to sort of dispel some of those myths around agents,
Sure.
So in reality, what does an agent really do? Like why
That's a
should
great
an
question.
illustrator look for an agent? Do they all need agents? What's the pros and cons?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll start with what, the agent has become, because there's no point in me being like, well, back in my day when I started, things have changed so much. So
Sure.
now the way I see it, an agent, whether you're an illustrator, animator, muralist, whether you do fabrication, photography, film, I believe your agent should be a partner that is working with you on elevating your career. period. That is like, I think, the primary focus of having an agent. Now, under the agent umbrella, there are agencies that specialize in various things. And I can really only speak for us. What we specialize in is project management. So we are a project management partner for our artists. And for us, it's like devils in the details. We're really big on airtight contracts, really good at statements of work, also called SOWs, and making sure everything's set up really tightly from the jump. So once they hit go and we have the PO and signed contract, everything's super smooth. We're a bit of a fly on the wall on the emails. We're on creative calls. We're making sure the artists are delivering, but we're also making sure the clients are upholding the schedules, that there's no scope creep, that they're not being asked to do or deliver more than has been agreed to. And so we focus on project management and coaching. And when I say coaching, I mean working with artists to help facilitate their career growth. And we do that through pretty traditional coaching conversations that kind of reflect therapy a little bit, except we don't do like trauma work. We're not licensed LSCWs, I believe is the word. But we do a lot of work on figuring out where the artist or studio wants to go, what's blocking them from getting there, and how can we overcome those blocks through accountability, vulnerability, and discussion. Now, there are other reps who are more so the schmoozing reps. Like they go out to every event, they go out to award shows, and their job, what they do is they just tell everybody about you. You know, they're really just like hitting the pavement. They're going to clients, they're taking clients out for dinner. And they're really what kind of I see more as like a PR style rep, where they're really out in front of you for you. And that is something that quite a few artists really enjoy. Like they want somebody who's out there really peddling their work to as many people as possible. I will say this, the like initial, the initial Instagram where we all were just like posting the food pictures and nobody really knew what it was going to be in the beginning to what it's become now. Sure. A lot of that work us reps used to do is being done on Instagram for the artists. Yeah. Granted, there's now a lot of weird things with the algorithm, people being shadow banned, like all this other stuff I know is like creating another kind of block for artists. But we, the agent world, are not the billboard we used to be for artists, because pre-Instagram, we got artists work in front of agencies and brands by bringing books and showing reels in-house. And you would have to go and call and cold call and email and send out direct mail. And so, yeah, so it's really changed. You know, and I think each rep agency that I know of is all figuring out what their foothold is in this rep world right now. It's a pretty interesting time.
Yeah, and how do you think that role is going to evolve with the introduction of AI? And how are you going to protect, say, your clients? Your bit of the industry, because the demand is going to be higher, and as social media evolves, and if the artist is good at that and can do all the promo and project management, then do they need an agent, or will the agent role switch to something else? So what do you see the direction of the agency world shifting towards?
There's a couple questions in there, so I'm going to try and answer them a bit in order that you asked. First, I would say with AI and protecting my artists and studios that I work with, what I will say to you, what I've said to them, try not to run from it. Make sure you understand it, give it a whirl and see if you can work it into your process. And if you feel comfortable doing so, then move forward that way. And obviously put it in your bio and put it in the work that you post that it is AI assisted. I do think there is a number of very baseline styles of artwork that are already seeing AI, quote unquote, take jobs from them. And that would be seeing a lot of storyboards coming from ad agencies where art directors and especially copywriters who know how to describe what they need are using Midjourney and DALL-E and other forms of AI to create storyboards and style frames. And that's really quickening up their process and reducing their bottom line in terms of budgets. So my advice to everyone who's listening is continue to hone your craft, continue to innovate, and I would say be very selective as to like what you do and don't share online. I think the thing for everybody to remember is without, I think, Instagram and everybody's websites and all the work we've been posting for like last 10, 15 years on the internet, without that, these AIs would have nothing to have been trained on, except for, whatever museum stuff they could scan in and advertisements out in the world. But, the data with which these AIs have been trained came from all of us, came from all the artwork we share, all the photography we share. So it's tricky. I mean, I think there are some artists who are really excelling because they've figured out how to hone AI and work it into their process on the sketch phase. So let's say you're an artist and it used to take you a week to do a sketch. Now it'll take you a week to do that sketch, but then you've worked with an AI program that can give you 5 different variants on that sketch, still in your style, that you can then submit to your client. That has really sped up your process. Again, as long as you're upfront about it, I think there's some ethics involved where you should be telling clients that you're using AI, especially advertising agencies, because there's still a lot of gray area in terms of the legal ramifications. So, it's really about, to answer your question, to protect my artists and myself and my company, is we always tell clients if we're using AI and we make sure that it's okay to do so. And I think that's the best advice I can give people is really be upfront about what you're using and make sure you are documenting everything. So that's that question. How the rep world is changing. You had said, if an artist can promote their own work on Instagram, project manage for themselves, and can handle client relations, what should a rep be doing for them? Probably nothing. Now, I don't know many artists who can get an influx of work and wear all of those hats at once and still produce the work they need to produce unless they've got a studio. So I would say where I find the kind of rubber meets the road, as you say, is if an artist has like 10 or 15 jobs a month coming in, those inquiries take time to suss out, to due diligence on, to see which ones are actually jobs, to estimate on, contract, negotiate, sign up for, and then produce. Therein lies like where a company and a rep like me would be helpful, because we take on a lot of the admin work, we take on a lot of discovery calls, and we'll just come back and say, hey, here's of the 15 inquiries, as you know, 5 are actually real jobs. And of those 5, these 3 are actually a decent budget. Of these 3, this one looks really cool and totally, in line with your values and what you're trying to work on. Which ones do you want to do? That aside, I think where the rep world is shifting is much more in the line of, like I said, career support, creative coaching, and actually helping artists get to that next level. Because, and I'll be the first one to say it, I don't think artists need us as much anymore to promote their work. Like Instagram, Behance, even, some of our clients are even using Pinterest, like our brand clients and ad agency clients. So there's so many areas where artists can promote themselves. Now, I'll happily help them put a promotional plan together. I'm really, one of my favorite things to do is portfolio reviews. It's like, I will be the first person to tell you, like, all right, that doesn't look good. We need to change that. This is what's selling for you. Put more of this on here. So there's a number of different things in an advisory and coaching capacity that I think, reps can be now. Whether or not some of them are going to do that is hard to say because, for a long time, the rep world was operating at a 35% commission where they would have an artist roster of, say, 40 to 60 talent, and only a few reps. So their margins were much higher. So they're going to have to adjust. And I think some of my colleagues and competitors aren't going to like that I'm saying that, but it's the truth, like you're going to have to adjust. You either give artists something different that they can understand the value for and pay for, or you start to reduce your commission because you're not doing so much of the marketing. You're not doing so much of the outbound selling because frankly, it's a saturated market. Most of my clients are telling me how full their inboxes are of newsletters, cold emails, and then LinkedIn's now getting flooded with that as well. So.
Yeah. I think you summed up like what an agent really does is reduce the load, especially for an artist or an illustrator who doesn't really want to do a lot of the business stuff, the admin stuff,
Yeah. Yeah.
and just make their life easier where they can just concentrate on making the art and you can do the stuff they don't like doing, which is all
Absolutely.
the detail oriented, contract stuff.
Yeah.
So my question then is, and this is a question I get a lot from other artists asking me, how do you get an agent, right? So you
Mm.
say you've heard what you've said and you're like, oh, I would love one. What
Yeah.
is it that agents look for? What are some pro tips on how an artist can put together their portfolio and present themselves to an agent so
Yeah.
that they look like a good candidate or a good
Yeah.
fit
Yeah.
for the agent to take them on?
Well, one, I would say understand who you are authentically. Like, really understand your story and who you are as an artist. What I've been seeing a lot lately, both from artists looking for reps and for outside vendors trying to sell me something, you can tell people are using AI to write a lot of their emails. And they sound, I'm going to say this as loud as I can, they sound really corny. Like, it can totally tell when somebody has used an AI to write an introductory marketing email. Be authentic, misspell some things, just make it in your voice. I don't care if it's perfect. I care if you sound like a real person and you sound authentic. That's in the tone of like how you reach out. And I always suggest reaching out via email, or if a phone number is listed. I know this is a bit much for the Gen Zs. Pick up the phone and call a rep. If somebody called me, I'm telling you, if someone called me and was like, hey, my name's so-and-so, I'm an artist, I really wanted to talk to you about representation, I'd be floored. I'd be like, that person would stand out. But most of it's done via email. Sometimes I get an Instagram DM asking me, and I just say, hey, forward me your email and send me your portfolio. And I would say keep it short and sweet. Know the rep that you're reaching out to and express why you want to join. And that could be you like their roster, or you like the projects you see them putting out, or you've heard someone like myself speak and you're like, you sound like the kind of rep I want to work with. Show that you've done a little bit of homework. Um, and then just really explain why you want a rep. And if, again, be as authentic as possible. If you're like, I'm not making enough money, I want my rep to get me better fees, say it. If you're like, I am overwhelmed with the amount of inquiries I get, and I really need help with the upfront administration, say it. Or if you're like, I keep getting swindled in my jobs, I end up doing way too many overages, I need help managing my clients, just really be like, this word is so overused, but be authentic about what you want so that we as reps know exactly what you're coming to us for. I think a lot of times freelance artists think there's this big professional world going on behind some curtain with some language that they don't know. And they have to use that language and be like, hi, I'm so and so. I'm an illustrator from here. And I think I could do a very good job of bringing in professional clients. And I'm like, that doesn't sound like a human to me. So I strongly suggest being as authentic as possible. You also asked when somebody should seek out a rep.
Yeah.
And this is an interesting question that I get a lot. And I will say this, you should seek out a rep when you want one. And I know that sounds kind of simple, but to further explain, it's like I said, if there's an artist and you're, been at this for a few years and you've done the client work, you know how to put together contracts, but you are just, like you said, sick of it. You don't want to do the admin. That's one reason to go and get a rep. If you are not happy with your current rep and you might have some experience, then at least you know exactly what you're looking for in your next rep. That's another reason to go get a rep. If you want someone to bring you more jobs, and that's why you're going to a rep, I will tell you right now, that is a very tricky proposition for all the reasons I said before. Artists really are their best promoters right now. Clients are finding artists themselves. They're going and using Instagram and all these other social platforms. And there is a connection to the client and the artist unlike never before. Before it was, we had to like bring the artist to the client, and we really were very gatekeepers of the artist. We didn't want the clients asking for things without us knowing. So we kind of kept the veil, but the veil's down. So clients know they can reach the artist directly. So I would say if it's what you're looking for is more projects, that you can look for a rep, and they will, unfortunately, a lot of them will tell you, especially if they like your work, oh, I'm going to get you so many jobs. I've got this client and that client, and we're going to make tons of money. I think if you reach out to a rep and they're like, I really like your work, I think I can get you projects, and I'm going to do my best to do so. That's like what you want to hear to that request of needing more jobs. I will say, for a younger artist, more inexperienced, who's maybe first or second year out of uni, or maybe you've pivoted and changed careers and now you're doing illustration, do it on your own for a little bit. Figure out what it's like to do those contracts, to maybe mess up and not ask for enough money, or do more revisions than you want, or not put a kill fee in and then the job get killed and be a little stuck. The reason I say this is because once you make those mistakes and you do that stuff on your own, one, you have an appreciation more so for what this rep you're going to hire to do it is doing, because you understand. And two, you're out in there in the world on your own. You know, you're learning on your own. You're learning as you go. And I think there's a lot of it's very formidable. It's a formidable experience. You know, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. From what I'm hearing, uh, basically, when it comes to reps, if your sole reason to hire a rep is to try and get more work, you're probably barking up the wrong tree. Because it's not that they won't get you more work, it's that that is not the biggest benefit. Biggest benefit is sort of the taking the load off an artist's shoulder when it comes to um, all the admin side of
Yeah.
stuff. And
Yeah.
potentially some agents might take a younger illustrator and help them navigate the career direction
Hmm.
that they should take if they see the
Yeah.
potential there. Um,
Yeah. Though there's also, and I would say that the other way a rep can help you make money is what they'll do is, what I try to do is I try to make sure that, like, if an artist is like, yeah, I think I'm getting like, 60 or 70% of what I want on jobs. It's my job, if we start to work together, to get you 100% of what you want. And
sure.
we know ways of doing that, like there's something that a rep taught me a long time ago. They're like, you can always go down, you can never go up. So, and what I mean by that is, if you want 25 grand, ask for 30,
Yeah.
knowing that most clients are going to try and chip you down a bit, right? Because at least if you then get your 25, or even if you get 23, right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
client feels like they got some kind of deal, you get the money that you wanted. There's like, and it's hard for artists to do this. I know this because I've done freelance illustration myself. And even after I've been a rep for 10 years and I started doing my own freelance illustration, I still didn't ask for enough money for myself. But a rep is going to help you close more, should help you, sorry, should be able to help you close more jobs, get better fees, and help you manage the process in a way that makes you very comfortable and takes you out of that left brain and allows you to live in the right brain, which is the creative side, and really get the juices flowing and focus on the work. I don't want to say reps aren't going to bring you jobs, because that's not true. I just think
Yeah.
the way it's changed in the last 19 years I've been doing it, we used to bring, I think, a lion's share of the work to the artists. And now it's probably 50-50, if not less.
Sure. Okay. That's good to know that there has been that transition,
Oh, for
because
sure.
better we are aware of, the more transparent the industry is, the better everybody is, prepared when approaching these situations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't only speak from my experience. I mean, the thing I'm very fortunate to have access to because of Collab and because of, I think, my reputation in the industry, is I talk to a lot of artists. And if I had a nickel for everyone who said, man, my rep hasn't brought me a job in like a year from a wide variety of rep agencies, I'd have a lot of nickels, and I don't think this isn't to down talk the reps. I think we
Yeah.
have to be honest about what's going on in the industry, like you said, because then we can all approach it from a much more realistic place. And so what I'm saying is, if more artists are getting jobs directly and then they're coming to me and saying, I need your help managing this, then I need to make sure I manage the hell out of that job for them, and really show them the value of having a project manager with a rep background on that job. And that, I mean, I'm not giving away any secrets here. That means if someone comes to you for a print job, it means asking them if there's a digital component. It means asking them if they want the artist to do any BTS, asking them if they want a social component, coming up with ideas that they maybe don't have or haven't thought of yet. And then obviously, like I just said, getting the artist the most money they can for the job that's at a market rate or better, managing it from, making sure there's no abuse of like rounds of revisions, and making sure at the end of the day, the work is then used to promote the artist for more work. I mean, the worst thing in the industry that's happened is there's a couple of very big name clients who I will not name because I've signed NDAs, who have promotional embargoes around their work. The artist can't say, I did this for X. And that's a bummer, like if a client says that, you should ask for more money, because they're basically saying you can't put your work in the window to attract more clients to buy it.
Yeah.
So it's those kind of things that I think are really helpful as a rep to bring to the table for your artists.
I just want to go back a little and clarify for the illustrator that might be looking for an agent.
Mm-hmm.
What you said was obviously be authentic, right?
Yeah.
Be clear about what you're looking for. What are some other things that go into consideration when choosing an illustrator? Just so that they are aware of, okay, these are sort of the list or the categories. I mean, it's not going to be the same for every agency.
No.
But if they have a rough idea of here are the things that agents generally are looking for in order to be considered, what would those things be?
Well, one, I would say make sure that you are bringing a style to the table that they don't already rep. Sometimes someone will come to me and I'm like, oh, they haven't really even looked at our website because their work looks like Brody's, or their work looks like Marielle's, or it's very much like Velvet Spectrum. So I'd say make sure you know who the agent reps already. Make sure that you're bringing something unique. Also, I would be very clear, like if it's a rep that does a lot of book publishing and editorial, but you want to do film and television, probably not the best fit, right? Because then you're almost setting yourself up for failure. Because even if they take you on and you don't want to do book publishing and editorial, then it's not the right fit. So kind of know what industry they're really operating within.
Yeah.
And then I would say, keep your portfolio concise. I don't need to see 40 pieces. I'd rather see 5 really good ones than 40 that feel like they're just filling up space, right? Like make sure it's contemporary. Make sure that it appeals to the work that you're seeing out in the industry too. I think sometimes less is more. And then I think every artist can benefit from this mindset. Do a lot of your own personal work and make that a part of what you're showing me when you send me your work. Because I want to know that when you're not busy with commercial work, that you are invested in your craft and there is a practice that you are diligently working at. Because if all you're in it for is when you get the client work, we're probably not going to gel well. Being an artist is a lifestyle, and I believe it to be in the heart. And I tend to only work with artists who are of that mindset.
Yeah, and if you're not doing work in between, you're gonna get stale. Like, creativity needs iteration. It needs exploration. It needs playfulness and curiosity. And if those things aren't being pursued, then you're gonna stagnate and you're gonna be stuck in a rut. And that's probably why you're stuck in a rut, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And what you just said actually sparked something to go back to a question you had about, when an artist should look for a rep. I also think there is, at least what I'm trying to do at my agency and what I'm seeing in my orbit, is there is a need for community, a really strong need for community. Freelance artists are extremely isolated. A lot of them spend time in their studio, which oftentimes is their home as well. And they have, maybe if they're lucky, they've got some artist friends close by if you live in like a major city. But it can be a very isolating and very difficult life to live on your own. So I would also suggest that, like, if you're looking for community, find a rep that is committed to that. Like for us, we are going to be, I think I told you this before, we're going to start running some cohorts for Collab, which are creative coaching for groups of freelance illustrators. So people looking to connect with other freelance illustrators so they don't stagnate, so we can, have show and tells, so we can do prompts, so artists can talk about the challenges of the work and the industry that we're in. These are ways that we keep those juices flowing and keep that fire lit, right? Is by community is everything.
Yeah.
So I would say that that's another one. If you really are creating a community, find a rep that seems invested in their artists and tries to do, like, I know some reps that do drink and draws where like they'll have a group of people drawing at a bar, and they'll do it in like a major city, or we will host like virtual meetings once a quarter. Like that's the kind of stuff I think that a rep could really benefit from doing for their artists, for sure.
That's a really good point. I think community is so important for an illustrator's, well, an artist's career, because we can't be an island unto ourselves, and without the stimulation of other creatives to push you further, I think again you get stuck, and
Yeah.
nobody likes to sit in isolation, right?
No.
And yeah,
Go ahead. Sorry, I just
yeah,
there,
no worries.
you brought up a really good thing, that a good point that I wanted to make. So I always remember art school, and one of the best and most terrifying things was critique day. When some of the best teachers I had, they'd be like, put all this art, you put it on the wall. None of you, that one teacher in particular, he would say, I don't want to hear one good thing about the art that's up there. You all know you're good artists. That's why you're in school. That's how you got into this school. We need to tell each other what is not working and what we can improve upon. And I think there is a part of that. And that's the thing that, like, we're going to be doing a lot in our cohorts, is the art of critique, is really like looking for feedback. And I think in this age where like you throw something on Instagram and the comment section is really hit or miss. It's either people love it or people are like, this sucks. And you're like, well, who is this person? And they're like, I'm a plumber. And you're like, oh God, how are they giving me art advice? So I think this idea of critique is really, really valuable right now. Extremely valuable. Share work with other artists. Let them give you some feedback. Otherwise, it's just such tunnel vision, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing that you'd mentioned with agencies and how everything is evolving, and how because of social media, the onus is almost on the artist to be a little more proactive because everything's accessible for them. So I'm curious about, what are your thoughts on artists building, the importance of artists building their own personal brand, of marketing themselves? What are some things that artists can do to put themselves out there so that
I had to take a deep breath there, because this is a contentious thing. So again, those of you youngsters out there, I started in this rep world 19 years ago, where there were a few artists who were like becoming a brand, like Tristan Eaton, who I was very fortunate enough to work with at B&A, was like a younger up and coming. He was doing toys, he was doing prints, he's doing murals, he's doing advertising. And Tristan Eaton was starting to make himself a brand. And I got to work with a couple artists who were like, yep, that's me. I'm building a brand. Most artists, though, they don't want to be in front of a camera. They want to make art and get paid to do it, and there's a decent amount of artists who still feel that way. However, the world has changed in the last 19 years, and Instagram has produced this need for everyone. If you are selling your work on Instagram, if you are pushing your work through that channel or any other social media, it is imperative you look at how you are selling yourself as a brand. We are all people. I really thought if you had asked me 10, 15 years ago if I'd be saying this, I'd have been like, no, people aren't brands. This is terrible. But we are in a stage now where you are a brand. And if you are selling yourself on social media, you have to consider that. And I know that we talked about this in our first meeting, you and I, like the importance of how we brand ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And I think when people think of a brand, they're like, oh, I need a logo. And you're like, no, no, no. It's so much more than that.
Yeah.
It's your tone of voice. It's the frequency with which you post. It's how you post your work. Is it organic? Is it like really well designed, pieces in situations? Like there's so many things to consider. And I would say with that in mind, I come back to this word, authenticity matters. You can try to sell yourself in the way that you think people want to see you, or you can really look inward and decide who you are and really approach it from that angle. And I think if you take the time to really figure out your voice, your tone, what your work is about, what's your story, and how much you're willing to share, you know, it's a recipe for building a good brand. It's one of my favorite words is vulnerability. Like how vulnerable are you willing to be? You know,
Yeah.
um, I think a few years ago, probably pre-pandemic, we would have said the best brand on Instagram is the one that looks perfect. And now I think the best brand on Instagram is the one that looks real.
Yeah. Yeah. That is so true. How that has shifted in perception, and I think
Yeah.
it's for the good, because
Yeah.
it will hopefully reduce the pressure to try and be perfect. I think that's a
Mhm.
pressure that a lot of artists put on themselves, and why they don't post because they're like, oh, it's not right, and then they spend so long creating work and not sharing it that they miss out on the opportunity to
Totally.
be discovered, to have their work, reach a client. Because
Yeah.
the exciting thing about social media, with all its pitfalls and everything, is that you get to access the world in seconds, or like there aren't any gatekeepers to stop you from like somebody seeing your
Yeah.
work, and so on that, I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on how artists can build a stronger client relationship? Like, how can they do outreach? How can they, take that personal brand that they've built and then use that to reach clients?
So that's a fantastic question and one I get asked a lot. And so it's got a couple answers to it. One, I will say start off again by being authentic and being yourself. Nobody wants to get sold what you think they want to get sold. And what I mean by that is, if you're an illustrator and you're doing woodcuts and you have prints and you do book covers and you really want to break into the footwear business, right? Like, okay, that's going to be a hard jump and leap for people to make. So maybe put together a few samples of what that could look like. Mock up a few shoes with like your wood prints overlaid on them. Get creative about how you present your work and then go and approach those clients. Because sometimes, even for the most creative people, it's hard to make that connection. And again, everyone's attention spans are so limited. You
Yeah.
really want to make sure if they do open that email, if they do open that LinkedIn message, if they do answer, like see that DM on Instagram, that what you send them is relevant. To that point, do your homework. Perfect example, if you see an ad you really like and you want to approach, let's say it's done by Mother, which is an ad agency, New York, LA, and I think UK. But if you see something that they did and you know who the creative director is, look up that work a little bit, study it a bit, know what you like about it, and use that as a talking point. Say, hey, I saw this ad you did for X brand. I really love this, that, and the other thing about it. I think we could do some great work together. Would love to share my portfolio. Keep it short, keep it sweet, make sure you're informed. And I just think that's really your best bet. And combine that with like know what time of year you're reaching out to people. If it's 2 or 3 weeks before Christmas, maybe give the cold calling a rest because everybody's just trying to get out for the holidays, right? If it's in the US, if it's like a couple days before 4th of July, probably not the best time to reach out because everybody's about to go on holiday. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
try to be mindful of the ebbs and flows of the industry. And then again, be authentic. Make sure it's something attention grabbing. Make sure that you're not overdoing it with the using AI to write all your stuff because again, it just sounds not good. In terms of platforms and ways to reach out to clients, it's trial and error. I think the best thing you can do is try something. If it doesn't get you the results you want, move on to something else and try that. Perfect example for us, we spent the last year kind of banging our heads against the wall because it used to be that clients would typically answer our emails if we did some cold outreach. But in talking to my clients, doing a couple surveys to existing clients, and speaking to people on the phone, what I found out is like everybody's inbox is just swamped with Substacks, newsletters, constant cold emails. It's just so easy to get people's information these days and reach out. And so we shifted to reaching out to clients via LinkedIn. And these are very short messages. And then again, sorry, Gen Z, I know y'all don't like this, making phone calls. Not a lot of people are phoning each other, you know, so a client is a little bit more likely if we're with a client who's in office and actually answers. But yeah, it's got to be a lot of trial and error. I also think that physical pieces of your work, if you're going to a creative event that you know a lot of potential clients are going to be at and you can afford it and you have the time, like do some kind of small leave behind print that you can give somebody. Those really still go a long way. A lot of us old timers love stickers and small prints or postcards. But yeah, it's an interesting time because all of that has really just, there's just been so many different ways to get in touch with people now. There isn't any one perfect way. And, you know, I just think you have to keep at it and you have to grind. It's a grind worth doing.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point about, you know, trying trial and error. And then the other thing is the leaving something behind. I found that was a very effective way of reminding your potential client that you're there, you know. So for instance, um, a couple of times I've gone into ad agencies and said, well, I'd contacted the art director and said, hey, I'd love to come in and show my work. And they're like, yeah, sure. It was a lot easier pre-COVID. And then like during COVID, obviously
Totally.
all that happened. But I'd go and show my work, usually through a creative that I worked with previously. And this is why it's important to have community. And then I'd go in and I'd always leave a set of prints for the office, for the art director who brought me in, you know? And so then those prints are going to go up on the wall, right? They're going to, they're going to be there for them to see consistently. And then the reality is the more present you are, the more likely you are to be hired, because the more visible you are, the more likely you're to be hired.
Yeah.
Because on social media, it's there 1 second and gone. But if there's a physical print as a reminder, that's
more. Yeah.
That's going to be more
you
memorable.
bring up, you remind me of 2 points. One, if you've worked with somebody and you had a good experience with them.
Yeah.
And I say this to every artist, studio, and any rep that might be listening. Every 3 months, reach out to those people to remind them you exist. Hey, how's it going? What have you been up to? Really enjoyed the work we did together. Here's some updates from, if it's an individual artist, here's some updates from me. If it's me as a rep, I have some updates on new projects we've been working on or some personal work that, let's say, Marielle's just posted. And make sure that you're like nurturing those relationships, because relationships are everything in this business. And if somebody's already worked with you, that's a great way to say, hey, I really enjoyed working with you. Is there anybody else at your agency that you think would enjoy working with me? And if you don't mind, could you do an introduction? And same goes for anybody who's trying the LinkedIn thing. If you're going to reach out to somebody and you see that you have 4 or 5 connections, find the person you know the best in those connections and say, hey, I see you're connected to this person. Would you mind doing an intro? That is like 100 times better than cold emailing and cold calling people, because you already have an inroad. And that inroad is really important to getting someone's attention. Because again, it's such a flooded market and there's a lot of selling going on right now.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned LinkedIn, because I think LinkedIn is the most underrated tool for creatives. And the truth is, it's one of the most effective for being visible in front of businesses, because the
Yeah,
reality is Instagram is full of other artists, and sure,
totally.
some businesses, some art directors are obviously going to be on there, but in order for a brand to be aware of you, if you are um, posting good content that is, bright and will catch people's attention in a platform which is quite word based, a picture
Yeah,
popping up grabs people's attention straight away. And so I
yeah.
found it very effective in that sense. And the second thing is, I think it's a lot easier, or it feels like it's more acceptable when somebody DMs you on LinkedIn. It's almost expected uh,
Mm.
that you're going to
Yeah, that
reach
it's
out that
business.
way, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah,
Whereas like on Instagram, it feels almost personal,
yeah.
depending on
It's
the
a little more
person.
social. I mean, it's called social
Yeah,
media for a
yeah,
reason, right? But and
yeah,
I think you're onto something here because I've talked to a couple artists about this, and most artists I talk like, oh, I fucking hate LinkedIn, and I'm like, I get it. It's not the prettiest platform. It is very business and corporate oriented. To your point, I think not only do pictures, both still and moving, get people's attention, story is everything. So you either share something about how you made it, share something about your how your expertise, position yourself as an expert in your field or in your style, and give people a glimpse into what it's like to work with you. Always give credit to where, if you're posting a job you did and the creative directors on LinkedIn or the art producer, tag them. Like let
yeah,
them know that,
yeah,
this was a collaborative thing. I do think that the approach on LinkedIn does need to be a little different than Instagram, because Instagram's always been like, hey, look at this pretty thing I made.
yeah,
And
yeah,
LinkedIn is look at how I did this thing, or look at
yeah.
where I'm giving this talk. It,
The
it really
knowledge
is.
behind it.
It's about positioning yourself as like a knowledgeable expert in your field. And again, a little bit of an overused word, a thought leader as
Yeah,
well. It's a really important time to like understand what is it. And to the point about branding, which I know matters so much to you, is it, what am I trying to say as a brand?
yeah,
It can be, oh, here's some new work I did. Great, cool. That's gonna go over fine. You're gonna get a couple likes, but ask questions. Give people a reason to hit your comment section. And this goes for Instagram as well. This is really what they changed back in late fall of 23 into 24. And a lot of marketing podcasts were talking about it, is engagement's everything now. It's not really so much likes. Hashtags are dead in the ditch.
yeah,
It's getting that engagement through Q&A on your comment section. So the more you can engage your audience, you do this by asking questions, asking for advice. What do you think of this thing I just did? What do you think of these two things? Which one do you like more? Do you
yeah,
want to see
yeah,
my behind the scenes? All of these things it's really engagement is everything. And that's, I think, one of the things that people miss out on when it comes to posting. It's just like a post. And even us as an agency, we do this sometimes too. We're just like, hey, here's this new work we did. And then I'm like, oh man, we really should have asked a question here. We should have asked people for their feedback,
yeah,
because that's what people are doing. They're engaging.
yeah. It's true. I think one other thing that I want to really discuss before we close this conversation is our market is changing so fast,
Mhm.
especially over the like. I think there was a huge um, boom during the COVID era because you couldn't do video, you couldn't do
Right.
photography. So
Absolutely right.
illustration was thriving. Like
Yep.
I think those were the best 3 years we've seen in the last
Mhm.
decade as far as
Yeah.
illustration is concerned. But I've noticed, speaking with lots of artists over the last 2 or 3 years, there has been a reduction in opportunities, uh, budgets constraints, people looking at the economy, wondering if there's going to be another crash. So all
Mhm.
these concerns are there. How do you think freelance artists should navigate this next, like how can they be prepared for this next season as things change? Because it's changing very quickly.
Mm. Yeah, you bring up a good point, and I think it needs to be also added that during COVID, we also had the NFT boom, which was
Yeah.
really good for illustrators, artists, CGI artists. and that whole thing started to take off, and clients invested a little bit and thought that they were going to add that as a media part of their media. And then that didn't happen. And you saw some artists who are doing the collectible thing really well. But all that said, yes to all that. 2020 to 2023 was like a very steep trajectory up. And 2023 into 2024, I've had the same conversations I think you've had with artists. There are less opportunities. The opportunities that have come through seem like the budgets are not so great or as great as they were during COVID. And I think, and this is just my personal experience in my 19 years of doing this, there's always an ebb and flow. And almost like a cardiograph, or what is that? The beep monitor when you're in the hospital, almost like the ebb and flow of that, it would be a little bit wider, the flows would be here and then it'd be here. Now it's just boom, boom, boom. Everything, it's like a heart rate that's just elevated. And to answer your question, the best way to navigate that is there's the practical, the thought-based, and then there's the emotional based. Practical, thought-based, save your money. Don't overspend. Make sure you're paying your taxes. Make sure you're keeping money away for a rainy day. I know that that's not what everybody wants to hear. It's not super sexy, but money is a motivator, and it is a major form of stress. And in the last few years, when we've more intentionally started coaching people from a creative coaching basis, the one thing I hear people talk about the most that is the highest stress point for them is money. So take that stress out by being frugal and being smart about your spending. Now, as far as the work goes, what to do when things slow down? Keep making work. It is really important, to your point earlier, that we don't hit stagnation. And I know it can get a little depressing when, you maybe lost a few jobs in a row, or some of them haven't come through, or one of your clients has decided to shift styles, but keep making work. It's really important that you start to build a practice of evolution into your work and really try to test the waters and play and share. And again, join communities, talk with other artists. I think one of the things a lot of artists miss is the opportunity to share work with each other. And what I mean by this is a lot of artists have work that comes in and they can't do it because of schedule, budget, whatever. How often do you as an artist though say, you know what, I can't take this on, but I know another artist that I think would be great for it? There really isn't a lot of that happens. And I've actually started doing this with some other reps that I know. We shoot each other work when we can't take it on or it's not a right fit. There's enough work out there. If we can all band together and do this, I think it's the rising tides lift all ships. I think everybody would do a lot better. So next time you think about saying no to a job, think about saying, I can't do this, but I know someone who can, and figure that out. It's because, look, paying that forward is always going to come back to you no matter what. Even if it's just a thank you from the artist you got the job for, that's worth it alone. So I think those are so that's some of the best advice I could give. Watch the market, try to have a better understanding of, what's going on in the industry. If you work with advertising agencies, get a subscription to, Adweek or something, and really understand some of the changes that are happening. So, if I think out in Detroit, a bunch of agencies out there just got the rug pulled out from under them and lost a couple of car accounts. Whole agencies have shut. It's really real bummer, and it's sad for a lot of people who were doing work out there and moved out there to work for these companies, for these car companies, but know what's going on in the industry, so you're not wasting your time, ringing doorbells that no one's home.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Totally.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it does, and to your point, I think that is something that isn't taken enough advantage of as far as community goes. I think if we're going to be we should be more intentional about building a community around ourselves. And I know for a fact that there are so many times where I've passed on something, or somebody has sent me work because they're too busy. And having that is a great way to, stay in it, encourage the community around you. And like you said, everybody wins at the end of that. The client is happy because they found somebody who's right for them. You might not have been right for that project, but then they'll come back to you and say, "You're really sound for sharing that person. We have a project that is tailored for you now because we really
Yeah.
like your attitude. So
Yeah.
I think that's the other aspect to think about.
Yeah, I tell my artists all the time. Sometimes if if a client comes to me for a project and my artist is super busy, I'll actually ask them. I'll say, hey, I also know Ashwin, and I think he'd be really good for this. Do you mind if I swing this his way? And they never say no, but I think it's important to ask them. But
Yeah.
my point being, and what I tell them is, the reason I'm doing this is because if I can't help the client with what exactly that they want, I can still help them get what they need, and then I become a resource for them. And so do
Yeah.
you as an artist. And like you were getting at, it's just a way to build a relationship in a different way, you
Yeah.
know? And I think those are like the really impactful relationships that we can have. But again, to your point, it comes down to building that community, which is again why I'm so excited about these creative cohorts I've told you about. I'm really thinking this is going to be a game changer for a lot of artists.
Nice. Uh, so to taper things off, what would be
Yeah.
one piece of advice you would give a young creative who's, starting out his career? Looking back at your own, is there one piece that you would say to the young Matt?
Ooh, all right. So that's two questions. First, to the young creatives starting their career, I would say find community, find a mentor. And if you see an artist that you love, reach out to them and say, hey, I'm a huge fan of your work. I'm just starting out. Do you have some time to chat? And just ask them everything. I believe mentorship and coaching is really important. And we're just starting to see the kind of boom of the coaching industry in a different way, shifting from life coaching to like more career coaching, which involves your life, even though people don't see the same thing. But I would say, yeah, like really find some community, find people that you like and whose work you admire, and don't be afraid to reach out to artists. People are really generous with their time and often will be really happy to chat with you. As for young Matthew, the one piece of advice I would have for him is to just be more confident. Be more confident. I think there's a lot of comparison going on right now because the world we
Yeah.
live in is like we all live on social media quite a bit, but don't look to that for your confidence. Look to the people around you who support you, who love you, who encourage you, and who you can be vulnerable with, and really lean into that, and just yeah, try to move through the world confidently. Like we're all in this together, and I think the more together we can be, the happier we all are going to be. Absolutely.
That's really good advice. Really good. The last question I have for you is, what does the word
Mm.
fruitful mean to you?
Man, I've listened to a few of your podcasts, and I know that you were going to ask this question, and it's actually a word that comes up a lot in the coaching community is
Yeah.
abundance, and for fruitful to me is in that same category of abundance, and I don't want to confuse that with the word like money or like having a lot of like things. Abundance is like an abundance of energy, abundance of love, abundance of like again community and care. Like that's what I think of when I think of fruitful. And I think this is fruitful. This interaction is fruitful, and hopefully people listening to it is fruitful for them as well. It's really like nourishing. I think is a great word that
Yeah.
that, that, that reminds me of. Yeah.
Well, hey, thank you all for listening to this episode of The Fruitful Life. I hope you walk away with some nuggets of wisdom. And if you did, please do me a favor and leave a rating and a comment to tell me what you think of the show. Also, consider telling a friend that might like it. As always, be true, be you, stay fruitful.